My name is Missy Morgan, and I am the marketing director here at Sante Consulting. I just want to say we're really happy to have you all today. The topic for today's webinar is Ready, Set, Start. Prepare for your first day after signing your employment agreement. No matter where you are in terms of if you've already been in your pathology career and you're looking forward to a career change sometime in the near future, or you're just starting out, you're a resident, you're a fellow, this will be a great tool for you to use for years to come. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Jen Barna. Dr. Jen Barna is a senior recruiter here at Sante Consulting, and she's got a really rich history in terms of her years working as a radiologist. And also, she's got a rich history in recruiting, having her own job board, Doc Working, and helping doctors to have good peace of mind and avoiding burnout and taking good care of their own personal lives and their professional lives throughout their career, and now working on our team as a senior recruiter in our pathology division. And then we're also going to be joined by Rich Cornell. Rich is our founder of Sante Consulting. He's the current president of Sante Consulting, and he's been working in this industry for more than 30 years. He's got a lot of great experience. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Rich, and then we'll go ahead and get started on the webinar.
Thanks, Missy. And when you say 30 years, that really ages me, so I appreciate that. Just kidding.
Sorry
Welcome,
about that.
everybody. Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited about this topic and to have Dr. Jen Barna um, give the presentation. But before we get started, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Sante Consulting. If you're not familiar with us, we are a healthcare recruitment firm that specializes in lab medicine with a core concentration in pathology. We recruit at the director level and above, work nationally, and we've become what I believe the premier healthcare recruitment firm in lab medicine, assisting pathologists from residents and fellows all the way to chair positions throughout their search process. Um, Today's topic, I think, is extremely important because it really sets the platform for your success for everyone from the time they sign their employment agreement to the time they start, bridging that gap, and then once you start, what you need to be doing to position yourself for success. And I'm pleased to have Dr. Barna as part of our team. I've known Jen for a number of years. Quick history there. Jen started out before she went into medicine as a physician recruiter with a firm that I was a training manager with many years ago. And she loved recruiting so much. She went on to have a very successful career as a radiologist. And when she kind of hung up the as pathologists say, the scope, not in her case, I guess the screen or the film. As a radiologist, she decided she wanted to be back into what she really loved too, which was healthcare recruitment. And she's throughout her career has coached many physicians on various topics. So we're excited to have her and give this presentation today. So with that, Jen, I'm going to turn it over to you. And at the end of the presentation, stay on because we're going to have a Q&A session where you can specifically ask questions to either myself or Jen about the topic or anything related to your new position. So Jen, it's all yours.
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate the kind introduction. I appreciate you looping me in there on the age tell because we've known each other for a long time. But I'm really excited to be here with all of you and appreciate the opportunity to talk about this topic. It is something that I have experienced personally, of course, and more than once in my career. And there is that gap between when you sign and when you start, and what do you do with that, and how do you make the best use of that so that when you arrive at your new job, you have set yourself up for success. You're not just going to show up and hope for the best. So that's what we're going to talk about. But of course, before we do that, if you are in a position where you have just recently signed a contract, I just want to stop for a second and celebrate with you and hope that you have paused to find the joy in this moment of making this huge decision before you step into perhaps the overwhelm, or what we're going to try to avoid as overwhelm, of everything that needs to be done before you get there and start that first day of work. So the anticipation, of course, is that what you may be feeling after you sign that contract, and then you realize how much does need to be done before you get there and start the work on the first day. Starting, a new job in a new city is a huge growth opportunity for you. And if anyone is moving with you, your family and or partner, it is for all of you together to experience. And so rather than just, as I said, just hedging your bets and showing up on the first day hoping for the best, I want to help you think about a few things that will really give you a more proactive approach and give you a strategy that will support your success in the long run, in the first few months, as well as long-term success in your new role. So before we get started on any specifics about the process, and we begin to break it down into the different steps, I want to just pause again for a second to say, trust the process. We're going to outline the steps, and as you go through these, there will be times where you feel like you're so in the weeds that it's hard to see the big picture. And just remember, there is a process. You have set this up for yourself, and just keep taking the steps, and you'll see that the process will unfold and will work. So with that in mind, the topics I'm going to cover kind of quickly are listed here. And I'm going to start out with these 5 preliminary steps that you can take this week to just jumpstart the whole process for you of getting yourself on track with a plan for success. So these 5 critical steps that you can take this week, we'll jump through these, and these each in and of themselves are not going to take a lot of time. A couple of them are just getting you started in the actual logistics of the move and the credentialing, and some of them are more of a reflection of what's to come and can really set you up to be in a good place if you just pause and do these exercises. So step 1, this is huge, and I'm sure somewhat obvious as well, but the idea is to make a list. And I don't know if you're experiencing this, but when you're about to embark on a huge process, it's normal for me anyway to sort of have all these things, these ideas swimming around in my head. Maybe I'm lying awake at night thinking about these, and that's sometimes the best time to think of all of these. I feel like, that's when they really appear in your mind. But what I'd like to encourage you to do is, as coaches like to say, a brain dump onto a piece of paper. So you're going to basically sit down, block yourself a piece of time, like maybe 45 minutes, and just write down, just brainstorm everything you can think of that's in your mind that you're going to need to do in the next however much time you have before you're going to start your first day, arrive at your first day of work. So every category of everything you're going to need, you want to just write them down like as quickly as you can. They're going to just flow out. You may have 10, you may have 1,000, depending on who you are and how you think. And it doesn't need to be a complete list. It doesn't need to be an organized list. Just get everything you can think of that's involved in that process, and get it onto a piece of paper. And then over time, you'll begin to refine that list. You'll begin to make other lists from that list. But the first thing you need to do is just begin to just get it all out. And of course, for me, it's a piece of paper. For you, it may be some other mode that you like to use electronically for this type of thing. And then what I want to have you do perhaps on another, maybe the next day in a blocked out 45-minute period or so, is to begin to track all of that onto a calendar. Tracking your deadlines is going to be so key through this process. And so what I would encourage you to do is think about major deadlines, find out what they are, put those on a calendar. I would recommend a physical calendar as well as maybe an electronic calendar, just so you can easily get a bird's eye view and see everything that's coming. And you can also day by day track that, of course, and know what you need to do. You're going to want to watch it very carefully week to week and month to month so that you know you're staying on track. Of course, you're not going to know all of these right now, but that list that you just made will be really helpful as a source to think about, well, what are some deadlines that I'm going to need to know? So as everything begins to unfold, you'll have more and more of those. And what I would encourage you to do is work backwards. So start with the deadline, and then, what are all the steps you're going to need to be able to meet that deadline? And everywhere that you possibly can, if there's an actual deadline, back it up by a couple of weeks and try to meet the deadline early, because things will come up, of course, that you don't plan for. And when they do, you want to have a little extra time so you can troubleshoot that. Okay, so step 3 of this process that I highly recommend at this juncture is to reflect on your finances. I would suggest even, just blocking a couple of hours, maybe on a Saturday or Sunday, go to your favorite coffee shop or some other place where you've got a nice view and sit down and go through a few different steps. The reason that I'm suggesting that you reflect on your finances as part of this initial process in this huge, list of many, many factors that you're going to be sorting through is right now is a really good time to do this at the very beginning, because you haven't started to make the huge decisions yet that you're going to be making over the next several months. And you're going to be changing jobs. So in this context, something has made you change jobs. If you're a fellow and you're taking your first job after all of your training, you're going to be getting a large pay increase. And I would presume that most likely, no matter where you are in your career, if you're changing jobs, you're probably getting a raise. So it's a great time now where you are to stop and look at your current finances and what's working for you, and to think about also, just a calculation, like what are the potential options for retirement investment in your new job. If you max all of those out, pull up one of those calendars calculators online and put some numbers in. If you max it every single year for 20 years, what would you potentially have at some interest rate you want to choose? Maybe 7% or whatever you want to play around with. But just to give yourself an idea, for planning purposes, before you start to think about how you're going to spend your raise, think about your future self, all the things you do for your future self. This is another really major thing that you can do to take care of yourself in the future. So up to you, but if you've thought it through, at least you know what your options are. And similarly, think about whether you've got an emergency fund set aside that would cover 6 months of expenses that you might have in your new budget. And if you don't have that already set aside, which I wouldn't necessarily expect you to, think about maybe in your new role, once you're in the job, how quickly you might be able to set that aside. So these are just a few things to think about. And of course, once you start looking at finances, it'll just help you to prioritize what you actually really care about the most and what is a meaningful way for you to use your resources when you're in the new job with a more expectations and maybe some deferred gratification expenses that are going to come along. I remember talking with a friend of mine who had just finished his MD PhD in neuropathology at WashU. And he said, so by the time he finished, he was in his late 30s. His oldest child was a teenager. And she said, Dad, now that you've started your new job, could we get Spotify? And so for all these years, he was just in such a frugal mindset, trying to get by on his salary as a fellow and as a PhD student. And so he, his initial reaction was like, oh my gosh, that's going to cost like, $180 a year or something. But then he said, I thought about it and I was like, yeah, we can get Spotify. And it was sort of like this, his mind just opened up to all the possibilities at that moment. And I would just say, before you open the floodgates, it's nice to have had this sort of pause to think about what it is you want to accomplish with your finances. So step 4, similarly, this is just another exercise to think about right now when you're in an objective, you're in the mindset of sort of having the bird's eye view of what's coming. You're not really into it. Again, I'm think about, once you're really in it, it's a little bit harder to step back and see the bigger view. So right now, think about realistic expectations. And I'm talking about realistic expectations for yourself and anyone who's moving with you in the first 3 to 6 months. And especially in terms of your success in your new career, your realistic expectations on the job. I know everyone who's here and listening is probably an overachiever. Probably, you are someone who has big expectations for yourself. And so it's a nice moment, taking a few minutes. And I would even suggest writing this down, similar for the budget stuff. Write it down so you can return to it later, especially if you're someone who likes journaling. Or even if you're not someone who journals, because thinking about this can be difficult, and especially if you're someone who is your own worst critic. If that's the case for you, then this can be a really helpful exercise. And the other thing to think about is sometimes thinking about yourself is a little bit abstract and difficult. It might be easier to think of it almost like you're advising someone else. So think about, like, if, for example, your sibling had just started a new really challenging job and moved to a new city, and they call you 3 months in and they're like, oh my gosh, by now I thought I would, I've been here 3 months already, I haven't even published yet. I hardly know anyone. I haven't unpacked. What would you advise that person in that situation? Of course, when you're the person who's outside of that, you're looking in and you're thinking like, of course you haven't published yet. Like, give yourself a chance. Of course you haven't unpacked, like you've been working since you got there, whatever the case may be, but sort of giving that some thought in terms of just being kind to yourself. Self-compassion can go a long way in this situation. And also thinking about your expectations can help you to sort out what is most important to you in terms of your priorities for those first 3 to 6 months. And it can allow you, once you identify those priorities, it can allow you to let some other things go. So for example, you're wanting to stack the deck in your favor to really succeed and establish yourself in your new career, which will pay dividends personally and professionally from then on. So if you're going to do that, of course, some other things might need to slide. Maybe you won't be able to cook, healthy, delicious, homemade meals, 3 meals a day or every day, or, maybe you need to hire out someone to do some chores for you, outsource what you can. Maybe you won't get unpacked in the first 3 months, and that's okay. Just have what you need available and let the boxes sit there. So just think about some of those things ahead of time so that you can really focus on what's going to have the biggest impact for the future that you want for yourself. And once you've thought about that, then is the opportunity to sit down and actually write out a flexible but a plan. Obviously the plan is going to adjust and change, but it's a great time to really start to draw that out, because the plan will need to involve small steps along the way. And Rome wasn't built in a day, and your new future won't be built in a day either. So when you plan things out, focusing on your top priorities, especially for those first 3 to 6 months, then you can build in the small steps that you're going to need to take to get yourself from point A to point B. And of course, as you go along, expect the unexpected. Part of this planning process is really about just positioning yourself to not be surprised when certain things happen. Don't be surprised if you get there and you feel homesick. Even though you're excited about your new job and your new community, maybe someone else in your household will feel homesick. These are normal things. And of course, when you think about it objectively right now, while you're making this plan, it seems obvious, like no big deal. But if you haven't thought of it before, it can take you off guard. So when the unexpected does happen, you want to just notice it and say, you want to look at it more from a point of curiosity. I knew this was coming. I knew something unexpected was going to happen. Okay, this is it. Maybe there's going to be another one. Just to give you an example, I was talking with a pathologist who had finished her fellowship last summer and moved to New York City for her first job. And she had never lived in the city before. And so she was a little intimidated about living there. So she arrives to the city. She had arranged to meet the moving truck at her new apartment, which she had not been to yet because she had not moved in. She gets there, the truck gets there. She's like, okay, good, and then the truck she had hired for a couple of hours to unload her stuff. And so she goes to open the door to the building, and lo and behold, her key to the building does not work. And so the driver is there. Literally, he has 2 hours to unload her stuff. And she is in a panic to figure out how to get into the building. The street is, the guy's double parked and already, she's worried about making her neighbors mad before they even meet her. So she searches through her emails and she finds the phone number for the building manager, calls him, he shows up, he gets her in the building. Disaster is averted. But the reason she was telling me the story is because the building manager turned out to be this fabulous resource. He knew the neighborhood inside and out. He talked while they're unloading her stuff. He's giving her all these fantastic tips about restaurants and shopping in the neighborhood and where not to go and important things to know about the building. And she would have never gotten that first intense hour of very useful information if her key had worked. So she had a really good outlook. And her advice when I told her I was going to be talking to you is never waste a crisis. It'll feel like a crisis in the moment, but see if you can find something good to come out of it. All right, so preparing for your relocation, many logistics steps, of course, to include. I don't want to get too into the weeds on this because I know you guys are probably professional movers yourselves already. You've probably moved for undergraduate school, medical school, residency, fellowship. If you're already in your career, maybe you've already moved before as a practicing pathologist too. But there are a few things that can be, just some helpful tips. And by the way, if you know of any helpful tips from your own moves, please, by all means, drop them in the chat. We would love to see them. This is, we're trying to help each other here. So definitely give us your tips, please. I would just offer a couple of things. One is that as you're when you're literally in the move, keep your paperwork with you, any kind of documents that are your personal documents, your medical documents, your vaccines, things that you're going to need right away when you get there, but also that credentialing file, the credentialing file that has all of your diplomas and copies of transcripts and everything else. That stuff, you're going to want to know where that is at all times. You're not going to want to check that at the airport in a suitcase. You want to just keep it in your carry-on. If you're driving, keep it in your car somewhere so that you know where it is. And you can easily keep track of it when you get there so you can use it if you need it. There are a lot of fun things about preparing for the move, visiting your new city in advance. But thinking about your neighborhood, where you want to live, if relevant, thinking about schools and beginning that process for your kids, and thinking about just the social part of where you're moving and what's available and things that you can begin to enjoy when you get to the city. So doing some research ahead can be nice and fun, and it can also be something that's great to do with your family if you are moving more, a whole household, something you can all enjoy together, and each person is going to have different interests and things to enjoy exploring. So finding your local social groups and interests ahead of time is also something that you can begin to explore before you even get there, which is just something fun and a way to potentially maybe even meet a couple of people before you get there, which can help with just starting to foster that sense of connectivity to your new community. The medical credentialing and licensing part of this whole equation is, of course, just a necessary step in the process. And a couple of pieces of advice for this without getting too much into the details of it, since I know that you'll be carefully walking yourself through this. I would say that what you want to do is track yourself through this process in a very fastidious way. You're going to want to, of course, make sure that you have submitted everything. Often, the first step is to go to the practice that you're joining and find out if there's someone who is going to help you through this process. A lot of times they do have someone in a practice that keeps track of everybody's credentialing, make sure that, when it's time for you to get re-credentialed, everything gets submitted. If something is due, they let you know. If there is someone like that, that is a very great person to befriend, and also someone who can help you in a huge way going forward, but also through the initial process. Also really take charge of this process, because there may be more than one hospital where you need to be credentialed. And as you go through the process, sometimes they'll be missing a document, or there might be something that would hang up the process. And you won't necessarily know that unless you're really on top of it, because they may or may not reach out to you in a very active way. They certainly aren't going to chase you down for it. Your file will just be delayed until you get them whatever it is that they need. So just watch it all the way through very carefully. You can use the FCVS, which is the Federal Credentialing website. That can be where you can get all of your documents in one place, and the different hospitals that need them, you'll be able to give them access to that. That's a really nice tool. And then the other thing to keep in mind is if you need a state license, you really need to get that application in ASAP, especially some states are slower than others, but it can take a few months to get a license. So your medical credentialing for the hospitals can't go through until your license is complete. So get that going right away. Get your medical license application in as quickly as possible. Again, just, the credentialing mistake, one in particular that I'm thinking of is just whether you have followed through enough to know that everything is finalized. I have known someone who showed up the first day of work only to find out that he could not practice because his he had not gotten full privileges yet at the hospital, because of some hang up that he just didn't realize had happened. And you definitely don't want that to happen, of course. Connecting with your new community, that, is something that you're going to enjoy doing. You're going to be building connections with new people, making new friends, really finding the people that you have a strong connection with, whether that's through whatever it is that you do outside of work, but also through your work connections. And the professional connections that you're going to have are going to be key. And many of them, of course, will spill over into your personal connections. But certainly in terms of your professional work, you want to really foster these connections, get to know people outside of work, or grab a coffee while you're at work or lunch while you're at work, and really talk to people, get to know them. You're part of the same team. You really want to feel that way. You want to feel part of the team. And by the same token, you also want to compartmentalize a bit. You want to keep your, whatever's going on at home. You don't want to bring that to work and talk too much about that. But also you want to get to know people. So it's kind of a fine line that you're walking. So anyway, that the personal connections are part of what makes the work so satisfying. You're going to be spending a lot of time with these people, probably more than you're spending with people at home. I love this quote: "Never get so busy making a living that you forget to make a life." So, preparing for your first day on the job, there are a few things that you can do that will really, again, just help you when you get there to really hit the ground running. And one thing I would suggest is get on site to the location where you're going to be, the city where you're going to be living, at least a couple of weeks before your first day on the job. Really, ideally, at least a couple of weeks, because you want some time to prepare for that first day. You want to be able to try the commute. You want to try the commute. You need to get, ideally, get your card access ahead of your first day of work, and you want to try it and make sure it gets you in. Make sure your parking garage key works. Make sure that you've driven the commute during rush hour or taken the train during rush hour, whatever your commute may involve. In addition, if you can get there, if you could schedule, like, say 15 or 30 minutes with somebody in your department ahead of your first day of work, so that you can test your login and make sure it works, and also just kind of see how the workflow is just from an outsider for a very brief overview. That can, and look at, like, the operation systems, for example, the EHR, whatever systems you'll be using. That can be really nice, just so that it's not just a complete, you just have no idea until you walk in on the first day. This way you'll have at least some idea before you walk in on the first day. And so another thing you can do is get your schedule ahead of time, which will be nice to just get, just to have some idea of what you're going to do. Because chances are your first day, part of it will be maybe just some orientation. Part of it may be that you have some clinical work to do. And, ideally, if you can use the systems fairly quickly, that'll be helpful. But of course, keep in mind, you're going to have an adjustment period, and it's just going to take a little longer than usual. maybe longer than you're used to do the same volume of work when you're first adjusting to all of the new systems. So on your first day, a few key things that you can do to really position yourself for success are arrive early. That will definitely eliminate stress. And if something on that commute takes up a little more time than you expected, then you have a buffer there. You have some time to play with. While you're there on that first day, take copious notes, ask lots of questions. You know, that feeling where, you know, oh, I wish I had asked this before because now I feel like it's too late. Like, it is not too late on your first day, especially. So just ask away everything you can think of. You'll be glad you took notes later because it's going to be so much information. There's no way you could remember all of it. Strong first impressions are really important because relationships are key to your success. So just think about that, smile at everyone, be friendly with everyone. Of course, these are obvious things, but like if you thought of it ahead of time, it can just be really helpful. The common mistake that I hear about the most, believe it or not, and I think it's easy to do this, and it's also easy to avoid it if you thought of it in advance, is to not use your phone. You don't want to be scrolling on your phone during your first day of work or first week of work, or maybe, you know, like give yourself a real advantage by not having that phone available. If you have a down moment, you know, just avoid the temptation to check social media, check the news, or whatever it is you usually kind of go to and maybe scroll. Because when someone's walking by and seeing you on your phone, like, they're going to just keep walking instead of stopping and engaging with you, for one thing. And also, you know, you miss some social opportunities, but you also, you want to really present yourself as very engaged to make that good first impression. So, of course, be engaged, show you care, show you really see yourself as part of the team in your first, 3 to 6 months, and of course, always really throughout your career. And I'm sure you're already doing this. Seek ways to improve. Just be watching for ways to grow and be committed. When I say be committed, in your first 3 to 6 months, it can be really helpful to just go ahead and plan from the beginning before you even get there, to get there early and stay late, and just count on that for a little while. It doesn't have to be a lot early or a lot late. It can be just 10 minutes early and 10 minutes late. But that, just planning for that can be very helpful psychologically, because then you're not disappointed that you didn't leave when everyone else left. Then instead you're like, oh, I have this extra 15 or 20 minutes or whatever you've set aside to maybe see, get through some work that, as I'm learning these systems, I need some extra time to do. Or maybe, once you kind of get the hang of that, maybe you're just looking for some efficiencies. And once you really get it down, you'll be leaving when everyone else does. But also, if you're planning ahead for that, it can give you the advantage of having your family support you in that as well. If you have, again, if you're sharing a household with others. All right. So keep in mind as you go, it's a learning curve. There is no way around it. It doesn't matter how brilliant you are. There will be a learning curve, and you will be taking these incremental steps to get through this learning curve, and you will absolutely reach your goals. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn it back over to Missy, who is going to help us with the question and answers.
Yes, and we do have some additional resources. There are some books that Jen has recommended in a variety of different topics to help you as you start in the new step in your career. And some of them are also online resources that you can quickly go and read an article or two, or all of them. There's a good smattering. So when we send out a PDF of all of these slides, you'll be able to see all of those resources and engage them as you wish. I also want to say that throughout the year, we care so much about the pathology industry and for pathologists that we're always trying to share tips and tricks for different parts in your career through our social media channels, whether you're on Instagram or Twitter/X or YouTube. We're also on Facebook. But these are our main channels. Then please follow us. We're out there to just share content that is hopefully helpful for you. And what we're going to do now is open up a Q&A so that Rich and Jen are here to answer any of your questions that you have. If you feel like there was something that we didn't cover, if there's a question just about the process for a new job or for the search or anything that we can help you with as recruiters, we are here to open up that Q&A for you. If you can enter your questions in the Q&A on your menu bar, that would be great, and I'll go through them as they come in.
Missy, I'm going to kind of kick some things off here for us as well.
Okay.
Jen, great presentation. I appreciate all the insight. You have more insight than Missy and I do, because you're a physician. You started those first jobs. And one of the things that I was thinking about as you were giving your presentation, it's a very stressful time, right? Especially for fellows and residents making that transition from the student to now you go live and you're actually signing out cases, whether you're a radiologist or pathologist. Jen, could you talk a little bit about what it's like to go into a practice, whether it's academic or private, and really be on the hot seat, right, for the first time? Not as a student, but as now you're into this practice, and what has been your experience with the practices you've been in about their tolerance to be able to come up to speed quickly for daily sign out responsibilities, right? Now I know with pathology it's a little bit different, but typically there's kind of what we call a grace period, right? Where they're gonna, especially a fellow coming out of training, what the daily sign out expectations are, and what that period of time might be from an expectation standpoint to really be up to a full caseload of sign out. Any thoughts on that, Jen?
I I would say that is really going to vary from institution to institution, and depending on the situation that you are joining. My first job out of training was a solo position, by not on purpose, but because they said they were hiring 3, but they only hired 1 person, which was me. So it was out of the frying pan into the fire in my case.
Oh, no.
But I would say that for most people, there is a somewhat of a transition period. But I would also say that, as we all have experienced in medicine, it's really like watch one, do one, teach one. I mean, you're in it, you're really as quickly as possible picking up the full load. And I think that, that's why I think you're looking to plan to get there a little early, stay a little late at the beginning, and then that'll really pay off. Because I think if you can quickly move through that transition, it's going to benefit you, because people will have so much respect for you, that you've quickly made that transition. And so I would just say you want to set yourself up in whatever way you can to be able to navigate that sort of transition from. But as a fellow, you're doing a high volume of work. So I mean, I think it's really not going to be that huge of a change. The part of the biggest change is just that you're going to be doing it in a new system, and the new system does things differently, somewhat differently than what you are used to doing. And so rather than come in and feel like, wow, we did this a lot better where I was before. I mean, you might think that, but you really have to adjust to how they're doing them in your new place, and give it some time. Be open-minded to what they may do differently, and just learn the new system.
Yeah, and I think that's critical,
Excellent.
not to offer too much opinion on how they can improve things right out
Yeah.
of the, if you see some process improvement that could be done, just know the political environment within the practice and the setting,
Yeah.
because you don't want to be that person, right when you first start to, you know, be disruptive, right? And that's what they'll view it typically as. And so I think you just got to be caution, and that's a great point. Be patient with it, right, Jen, and give their process time to see
We've
how
got,
well you acclimate to it.
sorry, I almost interrupted you. We
Go
have a
ahead, Jen, Missy.
we have another question from one of the attendees. I think it's a great question about starting the search and timing. When should I start searching for a job if I have a location restriction? I am a fellow now and have another year of fellowship ahead.
The sooner the better, I would say,
Okay.
especially if you have
Yeah,
a location restriction.
yeah. If you have a location restriction, I would start now. Start networking. You certainly reach out to us offline. You know how to get a hold of us. Any one of our senior recruiters would be happy to talk to you about kind of a strategy on how to approach it. But the sooner the better. And if you're not licensed in the state, go ahead and get the license now, because that'll even make you a little more competitive. Because if you look at the ads, any of the ads, or even with our client base, they prefer individuals that are already licensed in the state.
Really helpful. Got it. We are also at the end, when you receive an email from us, just as a follow-up, there'll be a link for the survey. And in the survey, if you're interested in us following up with you, you can just provide your phone number or your email address.
And one of the other things, Jen, that I think you certainly touched on is, bridging the gap. And one of the questions that I always pose to individuals, especially groups and even academic centers, is why people leave. Why do people leave? Especially and so if you're a fellow, statistics show, and this is not a Sante statistic, this is a New England Journal of Medicine. They do a survey, and they show about 45% of practicing physicians in general, lumping whatever specialty, change jobs in their first 5 years. So why do they do that? So that first job you go into is not um, always the job that you're going to spend the rest of your career, and it's typically the second one. But what they have found is that quality of life is one of the key components to moving. And when we talk to clients, many times what the clients say is the physician was very happy in the practice, but the spouse, the family, they were not happy with the community.
Oh,
And what we found is that, you know, as the physician, if you have a family, it's extreme. And Jen talked a lot about this. It's just so important to get them involved in the community and not to forget about them, because the physician, the pathologist that's at work, you're going to be working, you know, 60 hours a week, let's say. And the ones that are entrenched in the community is your family, your spouse, your significant, whatever the case may be, the children. And if they're not happy, when it's time to renew that contract, they're going to have a big voice in whether or not you renew it or not. And so if you love that job, make sure that they're involved in the community. And that could be functions as simple as getting them involved with other spouses and significant others in the practice. Um, and start, different things that you can do there. But I just wanted to stress how important that is for your overall, not only mental health at home, success in the practice long term is going to be vital to that.
And tying into that, Rich, if I can add something, I would say also as you're going through this process, and there are so many steps and so many parts to the move, consider if you do have a partner, or spouse you know, consider outsourcing to them. Like, let them take the reins and help, you know, move that process forward, because giving them ownership over that process can be great for them to begin to feel connected to the community as they're exploring houses and making decisions. And also it takes something off of your plate. So it really is a win-win. It's a way to get them connected to the process. You know, maybe you're moving somewhere that they're like, okay, you know, like maybe they're feeling a little tentative about it. This is a great way to help them jump in with 2 feet. And the same for your kids. Like, as you're strategizing for your own expectations for the first 3 to 6 months, like, sit down as a family and say, let's all think about the first 3 to 6 months. If your kids are old enough, if your kids are really little, then, you know, you got it covered. They're going to be happy no matter where they are. So,
Right.
no problem.
But
We've
yeah,
got another.
don't neglect that. Yeah, that's a great point. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're all excellent points. I'm relating just as somebody who's moved a lot. Um, I have another question here. One of the attendees is saying, I just signed a contract and I'm unsatisfied with the starting salary. Do you have any advice on how to advocate for a higher salary once in the job? It's a great question.
I just want to say congratulations on accepting a new position. That's very exciting.
Any advice on how to advocate for a higher salary? Oh, Rich, I think you're muted all of a sudden, but he is talking.
Rich, we can't hear you. Maybe he can't hear us.
I don't think he can hear us either, but he is going with gusto. So I'm gonna send him a private note.
Okay. Well, meanwhile, I think he's getting your note there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we will have some advice for that. And I think it is a great question and a good thing to think about positioning yourself for that in your new job.
Yeah. Rich, can you hear us now?
We can't hear
hear
you.
you. It must be a headphone thing because
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Yeah, my headset died.
Oh,
I apologize. But what I was and it died right in the middle of my response to that. But that's a great question. And so, you know, you really need to make yourself valuable to the practice and to the setting. And so if you go in and you have a 1 or 2 year, whatever the term of that agreement is, you know, you're going to be in a very strong negotiating position when it comes up for renewal. If you made yourself, you know, very valuable to the practice as far as productivity, value, um, value as an employee, committee work, those types of things. And so that's going to be the way you need. It's all about positioning and how they perceive you during that first year or two, whatever that term is, to get an increase. And if it's a large practice, just keep in mind that you know these practices that have, especially academic centers, at assistant professors, they have a range that they start their assistant professors at, and everybody starts at that level. And they keep parity among everybody. So whatever that number is, and if they've hired other people that are coming in at your same level with your same level of experience, they're probably, especially in academics, at that same number.
interesting. Rich,
Any additional thoughts on that, Jen?
I think you have great points. And I would just say, you know, the other thing is you want to definitely have the reputation for being well liked. Because in addition to checking all those points off on your list of things that you're going to need to get a promotion and or a raise, or a raise and or a promotion, one way to get a raise is to get a promotion, especially if you're in an academic rank. So there will be a list of things that you're going to want to do to put yourself in that position to be eligible. But certainly having allies is going to be a huge, huge help for you.
And if you're in private practice, it's all value based on involvement in the practice, participation, and you know, and I think also, like Jen said, if you're well liked by the people in the practice, they're going to advocate for you.
Those are all really, that's very helpful answer. Yeah. Well, we don't have any other questions on the board. I'll give everyone just one more minute to insert a question if needed. Jen and Rich, thank you both so much. We do these, I would say, about once a quarter, at least 3 times a year. So there will be other opportunities where we address topics that are really important for both fellows and residents and also practicing pathologists. So stay tuned, watch our social channels, and we just really appreciate you joining us and giving up your time to connect and learn more about ways to get a really good start for your next job.